Well, I was sitting, waiting, wishing you believed in superstitions. Then maybe you'd see the signs. But Lord knows that this world is cruel, and I ain't the Lord, no, I'm just a fool. And loving somebody don't make them love you. Must I always be waiting, waiting on you? Must I always be playing?
The scavenger hunt started at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, one of the most visited places in Savannah. This cathedral was built in 1873 and dedicated on 1876. In 1898, a tragic fire almost destroyed the place, losing the entire interior. The only things that survived the fire were the outside walls and two spires.
In 1987, the Note Tracker organ was installed. It is made of white oak. The console trim is black walnut. This organ has 34 hanks and more than 2,000 pipes. Located above the organ is the rose window. It shows Saint Cecilia, the patroness of music, and celestial figures singing and playing musical instruments.
Go.
Hi, my name's Don. I'm a tour guide here at the Sorrel Weed House. Sorrel Weed House was the very first house built on this square, 1840. It's a Greek revival, columns, double staircases there, but it also has a Caribbean flair. The orange color, there are other elements of style that give it this kind of a Caribbean vibe because the guy who built the house was from the Caribbean originally. He was from Saint Dominique, which for more or less became Haiti in the Dominican Republic. So it's basically colonial Haiti. His daddy was French. He was a colonist there, a plantation owner. His mother was from there. She was Creole. Her family also had plantations, but that's how he came into the world. He had a French daddy, a Creole mama, and was born down in Saint Dominique. They had a big slave rebellion down there. Long story short, the slaves took over the plantations, they killed a lot of the owners, and they ran the French out of the country because they were really pretty rough as far as slave holders went. Those were probably some of the worst plantations that imaginable. But the French made a lot of money. At one point in time, it was actually the richest colony on earth. So that's kind of the world it came out of. All this turmoil was going on because of this rebellion. His daddy left him down there as a kid, and eventually he made it to Savannah and became a big successful businessman. And he was a merchant here. He sold sugar, coffee, and corn and flour, whiskey, cotton, all that good stuff. He married into the Moxley family from Virginia. They had a big plantation up there and some daughters. So he married one daughter, had 3 kids with her, Lucinda Moxley. She died from yellow fever, so a couple of years later he married her little sister, Matilda, and had 8 kids with her. So they had a bunch of kids, and probably the most well-known of all their kids, Gilbert Moxley Sorrel. He's the one who became the 26-year-old Brigadier General in the Confederacy. He was one of Robert E. Lee's generals, and did pretty good for himself in the military as far as that goes. But that's the basics of the family. He had a brother named Frank that also served in the Confederacy, was a doctor. He, by the end of the Civil War, was in line to become the Surgeon General of the Confederacy. But the war ended, so he never attained that position. And they were not going to let a Confederate become the Surgeon General of the United States. So that was the end of that. But really rich and fascinating history at the Sorrel Weed House. The way he ended up here even is just an amazing story. He had got stuck down there with his nanny when he was a kid, and his mother had already passed away. So 10 years old, he just survived with the nanny and some of his mother's relatives that were still around the island. And when he was 14, he went to work for a couple of guys from Baltimore that had a sugar and coffee trading business. And then from there, he ended up in Baltimore. And then from Baltimore, they came to Savannah, set up a location here. So, really cool story of how he was made here. It's American history. You know, he was immigration, overcoming adversity, doing really good for yourself, tragedy, plenty of tragedy, and then the Civil War coming in the middle of it. But yeah, they did have a big family tragedy. That's where they get the ghost stories from. They do the tours at night. Basically, the wife killed herself, and they found the slave girl hung, most likely murdered. It's one of the first houses placed on the historic registry in the state of Georgia back in the 50s, and they put a historical marker there in front of the house at that time. Over the years, though, it became a store downstairs. There was a big store down there from the 50s into the 80s. They still let them do that to the house, even though it had this historical marker placed in front of it and was on the historical registry. But you know, over the years, this guy came back and he restored it and did it really, really good job as far as getting it going back to its former beauty. But it was the first house built on the square, and it was, it's known as one of the finest examples of Greek revival architecture in the country. But it still kind of has that Caribbean flair to it too. You know, it's not really just a plain old Greek revival house. So it's just an interesting house all around. You know, it has some really cool features from the time period. And, Francis Sorrell, the guy who built the house, he only had it for 20 years, and then that tragedy took place, so he ended up moving. He actually moved next door. He built that house over there for his son. But he sold it to the Weed family, and they had it for over 50 years. That's why it's called Sorrell Weed. The store, well, the Weeds, from the Weeds, the Cohens ended up with the store. A family named Cohen. They put a store in. They lived on the main floor. They had little apartments in the rest of the house upstairs there. That's just the way things were at the time. The old DeSoto Hotel was right there across the street, and they tore it down in the 60s and built that. Just shows, it's a really cool example of the way things weren't really appreciated at certain times, and then now a lot more appreciation being shown for the historical buildings and architecture. And because Savannah had lots of different styles of architecture, this one and the Owens Thomas house are basically Greek revival type houses. Over there you have one that's a Gothic revival. So, it's just sort of one of the houses that you can use and compare different styles and looks.
Originally, part of it was an old Ford car dealership with Model Ts, and it was called Bryson Hall, and on the side it says Bryson Automobiles. And then over the years it was anything from a pharmacy, rumored to maybe be Clary's Cafe. Then in the 70s it was a department store called Town and Country. And then an arts and crafts store, and then renovated and to be the coffee shop now, and we've been here I think about 13 years. So some of it's still original flooring and exposed beams. It's called penny tile, and that was original when it was the pharmacy. Like when it was like pharmacies were like meeting places, and like soda pop shops, and people would hang out there. a neighborhood corner store.
The Telfair family was one of the most important families in Georgia during the 18th and 19th centuries. The family patriarch was the Scottish man Edward Telfair. He was a revolutionary patriot that became governor of Georgia. His daughter, the philanthropist Mary Telfair, was known for leaving her house and furniture to the Georgia Historical Society. She wanted it to become a museum. Nowadays, Telfair museums consist of 3 buildings: the Telfair Academy, Owens Thomas House, and Jepson Center. They also has a square named after them.
Rayana Bee Company started when our owner, Ted Dennard, was around 12 years old. So an old gentleman named Roy Hightower came to his parents' land out on St. Simon's Island, and he's a beekeeper and he wanted to make Tupelo honey, so he came down to his parents' land, asked them if he could keep his hives on their land because they had a lot of Tupelo trees growing down there, and he wanted to make Tupelo honey. So Ted's dad said, absolutely, as long as you teach my son everything there is to know about beekeeping. So it all really started there. Roy taught Ted everything there was to know, and Ted really fell in love with the art of beekeeping. He was only 12 years old and he gained like a lot of knowledge and experience. So he kept up with beekeeping through high school, and then eventually Roy passed away, but he also kind of passed his hives on down to Ted. So Ted continued to keep up with it through college, and then after college he joined the Peace Corps, where he moved to Jamaica for 2 years, practiced beekeeping with over 100 other beekeepers there, and then they eventually taught village farmers in the area how to keep bees themselves. From there, Ted kind of traveled the world a little bit, learning different methods of beekeeping, because there are tons of different methods. So he went to Vietnam, France, Italy, moved back to the area in the late 90s, where he started working at Open Island Wildlife Center. Started up about 5 hives of his own, and eventually his hives were starting to make Tupelo honey and gallberry honey. And Ted's roommate at the time suggested he start bottling his honey and selling it in her store, One Fish, Two Fish. So Ted went around to local restaurants and collected old wine bottles and started using the wine bottles to bottle his honey. So he started selling his honey at her store, and it really took off from there. People loved it. People fell in love with the Tupelo. So that's really like the honey that made our company famous. So yeah, this is the flagship store. We opened in 2008, and the company was established in 2002. We now have a store on River Street, one in Charleston, and pretty soon we'll have a store on St. Simon's Island, where it all starts. It's really cool. But yeah, most of our honey comes from just different places in Georgia. We have private beekeepers that keep our hives out there.